coming up on the Lead Ministry Podcast.
See what you're doing right there. Time out. What you're doing is you're making a positive assumption. You're not coming down on him and wanting to slap his hand.
And now your host, Josh Denhart.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Lead Ministry Podcast. Hey, we're doing this thing called Success Stories. And I have my special guest, Josh Zello. He's a friend of mine. He is absolutely just one of the greatest guys you'll ever know. He's a theologian. He's a preschool aficionado in terms of ministry, but also, you know, he is just a growing leader. And so that's super fun. Real quick thing, just super grateful that you're here. This is the Lead Ministry Podcast. The Lead Ministry Podcast kind of has this feel and this vibe of providing you with what I'm going to call national level breakouts. Remember, like you go to a breakout session someplace and you think, oh, wow, that would be such a great idea. Well, that's what we want to do. That's my goal. Like I have a written goal that every podcast is kind of a national quality, national caliber like breakout session that you could sit and listen to an interview between me and another quality person. And then you're like, man, that could change the way that I do ministry. Well, that's what we do. We seek to help you, the ministry leader, to number one, get organized. Number two, to stop the revolving door of volunteers. And number three, we want to help you prevent burnout. Well, the topic that we have today, it's a doozy. The concept is switching, not ditching. And the reason why we want to have switchers and not ditchers is that I want my Saturday night back. What does that mean? Well, if you've been in ministry for any length of time, you know just like I do that Sunday is always coming. We get that. But not only is Sunday always coming, guess what else is always coming? Saturday night cancellations. And that completely hijacks my life. Well, here we are with my good friend, Josh Zello. Good to see you, Josh. And we're doing this little series called Success Stories. And that's you, man. You're a success story. You've listened to the podcast like others that are listening. You jumped on and joined Lead Volunteers. You implemented some of those things. It was helpful for you. And then you thought, I wonder how deep this hole goes. And you joined Lead Ministry Coaching. You're one of my guys. I meet with you on the regular. We just had 2 calls in the last, 5 days. It was fantastic, right? And so you are a successor. So today we're going to talk yet another episode of a success story. Last time it was how you got out of doing childcare for every Tom, Dick, and Harry and every single brand new startup ministry. Well, let's have childcare. And then you were tasked with that. That was coming at a cost to your main thing, which is Sunday mornings. You were actually failing at Sunday mornings because of the expectation that you had to provide childcare for everything. Pause everything real quick. My goal is to help people get organized, to stop the revolving door of volunteers and prevent ministry burnout. Whether you realize it or not, the non-sustainable pathway that you were on to provide Sunday mornings and all of this childcare stuff, that was heading toward burnout. Would you agree?
It sure was. And it did for some of my faithful volunteers.
They quit.
Yep.
And the reason that they quit is because you and I didn't have a airtight plan that caused them to not feel the pain and the strain. When they feel the pain and the strain, they're out, which then means we're on the hook, which then means we hedge toward burnout.
Yep. No, Josh, it was bad. Every week, group me was, hey, we have this event next week. We need childcare for it. Who's in?
Yes. Okay. So listen carefully. That right there was last week's episode, was about the pain and the strain of finding childcare for every single thing in the church. We got a plan for that. Listen to last week's episode along with podcast number 37 back in the day. However, there was another success story, Josh, where you listened to the podcast, you followed along with Lead Volunteers, and you came up with and adopted a system that I've created. It's an organized system. It is a relationally heavy system that helps volunteers not start going through that revolving door, but it ends up helping you not get burned out. I call it switching, not ditching. take it over. Tell us, define it for us from your vantage point, and let's just go with the definition right now. Switching, not ditching.
Yeah, so this is instead of every week when you have volunteers that get sick or can't come or have to go into work, and instead of them either just A, not showing up,
Yep.
or B, sending you a late night text at dawn saying, hey, sorry, can't come. And then you're having to send tons of text and Facebook groups, and you're doing all these things to try to fill those holes. It is now on you. No,
Yes.
not ditch means that, no, volunteer, it is your responsibility that this role is filled. And if it's not by you, it's by somebody else. And you now have a mechanism that you can go to the whole team and say, hey, I can't serve this week. I was scheduled. And somebody will raise their hand and say, well, if you can take July 12th, I can take this one.
Yes.
And
in a swap, an internal swap has been made. Now, I remember a long time ago, Josh, when I first decided to try this, because our people, our staff people and myself, like, hello, we're out on a date, Saturday night, and all of a sudden I'm being pulled away, or I'm at an event, or I'm with some friends or whatever, and I'm pulled away because now I have drama and trauma to solve this hole that's coming up in less than 12 hours at church.
Yeah, Josh, I would lay awake at night, like stressing about the twos room.
Right.
Oh, there's not anybody staff for the twos room.
Because you got a super late notification from a very apologetic volunteer. I'm not saying that they're losers. I'm saying that life happens. Okay.
Right.
So watch this. Given the idea that, let's say that I have, 50 volunteers. Let's just use that as a number. The idea that every one of them are going to be able to fulfill on their volunteer role every single time without any blip. Okay, it's time out. Somebody's going to get a snotty nose. Somebody's going to forget that they were supposed to go to grandma's. Somebody's going to forget, hey, guess what? We have this soccer thing. I'm not making a judgment call, but some people are going to, whatever. My point is that people have lives outside of church. Quick thing. A lot of children's pastors and a lot of ministry leaders, they do not think that people have lives outside of the ministry. Wake up.
And that's even more so here because we're in the same town as Johns Hopkins. Most of my kids ministry volunteer team are training to be in healthcare.
Okay.
Get called into a late night emergency this or that. One of my leads in the kinder through fifth grade room is a pediatric oncologist.
Yeah.
Who knows what she's going to get called into. And I can't blame her that a child's tumor's back. So
that's
now she's
exactly right. Okay, so let me just push pause. Little did I know that you and I were actually a lot more similar. Not just our first names are Josh, not just that we're both kids ministry people, but in my town, we had a thing called Des Moines University, and it was a doctor university. It was high end. It was very expensive. It was churning out really, really, really strong doctors. Well, we would get these people who would come to our church for 3 years, and then they would go off to their doctor assignment. Similar with you, right? Maybe somebody out there is listening and they're like, oh, mine's similar, but mine's the military. And so all of a sudden you have this military town and people come in 2 to 3 year increments. You build into them, but they're going to be exiting soon. And that's a hard run. We could have a podcast on that sometime. How to manage people that you know are going to be short-termers. Set it all aside. What you're saying is you can't shame somebody who is in medical training at Johns Hopkins and they are literally called in at dark 30 for a medical emergency. And they're like, hey, listen, I'm not going to be able to serve in kids ministry tomorrow. Okay, get that. The historical model that the majority of people in a kids ministry or a youth ministry space is, yikes, that comes to you. You're the exclusive clearinghouse for making sure that Sunday morning is going to be filled. This person says no, you're now on the hook to go scour and beat the bushes to find somebody.
Yeah, at my last church, what I had found was the capital that I had with volunteers was wearing thin. Because every Saturday night, I'm sending them texts saying,
oh my word.
And can you serve in this role?
Okay, so watch carefully. Watch carefully. I got to go back to these 3 goals that I have. Number 1, I'm wanting leaders in ministry to get organized. You look like a hyper disorganized person, even though it's not your fault.
Right.
That's 1. You look hyper disorganized. You're like, it's me again. It's Saturday. Can you pinch hit for me? You look like a scattered non-leader. That's bad news. Number 2, watch this. So I want to help people get organized. I want to help people stop the revolving door of volunteers, because guess what? You are wearing out your welcome. What does Solomon say? He says, don't often be in your brother's house lest he hate you.
I was in their house every Saturday night.
Okay, am I right? So watch this. Get organized, and you are appearing as if you're not organized. But the thing is that deep inside you wanted to be like, it's not my fault. It's not my fault. It's not because I'm responding to somebody who has an emergency in their life. Their emergency now became my emergency, and now I'm passing that on to you, random volunteer who's getting this text again, that it's now your emergency. So, okay, get organized, stop the revolving door of volunteers so as to prevent burnout. These people were burning out of you, which then you're now cannibalizing things again. People are getting tired of this, Josh.
Yep.
So tricky. And so the idea, and I felt the same thing. And so many leaders across the country. But here's what I want to say, man. Again, hats off to you, because you felt a pain. You saw this is actually going to be ultra destructive. We're in big trouble if we don't solve this. And then you came up with a workable solution that was organized, that did meet volunteers' needs. And ultimately, you're out of the picture altogether.
Well, and what I found is that the change was being scheduled for weeks and weeks. Schedules being sent out for weeks and weeks, because my last church, I had heard you teach switch, not ditch.
Yes.
And that would be nice. I don't know how that works, because every Tuesday I just send out next week's schedule.
Bad idea.
And I didn't know any other way.
So in other words, you came into an existing model, a church of 1,700.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is just what they did.
Right. And I thought, okay, we just do this. And then you had taught, okay, switch, not ditch. And I'm like, how does that work? How do they switch? They don't know when they're going to serve. I guess I could put them all in a group text and somebody can say, I got this, but that's not a switch. And then when I came here, this church schedules out for the entire quarter.
Yes.
And sends that out. And if you don't have that date blacked out, and if it falls within, you had said you want to serve 3 times every month, and it's one of those 3, when we press send, you are in that role.
That's right.
It is your job to fill that role.
Okay, now I want to push pause here real quick, because the concept of switch, not ditch is that you have, let's say, 50 people on your roster.
Yep.
And when this person who is number 37 on the roster, they're signed up for this week, they can't do it. Rather than getting a hold of you, they're going to get a hold of the 49 other people who are their peers, and they're going to say, hey, listen, I've got this conflict. Can anybody take this for me, and I'll take yours in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or whatever you got. And so then they go, all of a sudden they go, oh, by the way, this is called the law of reciprocity. The law of reciprocity. I help you, therefore I'm going to help you back. So there's this kind of reciprocity, or this kind of payback thing. And this is part and parcel to being a human being, okay? Bears, stick with me. I'm a biology guy. I'm a chemistry guy, so I always think in terms of science. Bears are independent animals. They do not live in community. They fight with other bears to take over this territory. But a bear rolls solo. Humans are more pack animals. In other words, our survival strategy is we are better together than we are apart. So even embedded in our actual DNA is this concept of, if I help somebody, that is a survival strategy for me, because they're probably going to help me. This is part of the play, is that we as human beings, it's hardwired into us that when we help somebody, they're likely going to help us.
Right. Yeah. And what we found is that it serves everybody there. So just last week, I had one volunteer who said, hey, I can't serve this week. I have to work now. Somebody else said, I just found out that my mom is in town in 4 weeks. Do you want to swap with my slot in 4 weeks?
Both people's needs have just been met.
Yes, because this volunteer whose mom was in town had just told mom, sorry, I can't have lunch that day. I know that you're here, but in City Kids then. And then when this slot opened up, they said, wait, I can just swap.
Both needs have been met. Now, without this little superstructure, maybe let's imagine that girl who was turning down mom for lunch got pressured by her mom and she's like, fine, whatever. So without the switch and ditch, she calls you and now you got to fill it again.
Yep.
Okay. Now, here's one thing that, and I get it if you're out there in podcast land, you might say, ooh, I can't expect my volunteer. I don't want to have a revolving door of volunteers. I don't want them to feel burned out. If I tell them when I recruit them that they're on the hook to find their own substitutes, that's more pressure on them. And let me tell you, Josh, I ran this 2 different ways. I ran it the switch not ditch 1.0, which failed, and then I ran the switch not ditch 2.0 and it worked. I don't even know if you know this story, but the 1.0 was I just said, hey, and if people said, hey, well, when I need to get time off, what do I do? Or if I can't come in, what do I do? And I said, well, we have this list of people and you can ask them. And they're all like, that's your job. That's not my job. And I was like, well, I don't want to do that. And so we tried it, and the 1.0 version, hear me out, podcast people, it did not work. And the reason that it didn't work is because they felt that it was a burden, not a blessing. So the 2.0 version was as follows. I spent time to bring that group of 50 people, let's say, together. We did a lunch, we did an activity, we had food, we had some type of a community building, and I made sure that those 50 people knew who each other were. That's where this all falls apart. It's not about creating a sheet and then pushing that off to the volunteers and go, you're on your own. No, that's not a winsome approach. The way to make this happen is that you make people feel as if they're friends with all of these other people, and then they don't want to let their friend down, or this person says, you know what, I would love to pinch hit for them because they're my friend. Right. Everything in ministry is about relationships. So I got to tell you, 1.0, colossal fail because I just shifted the responsibility to them without any understanding of who they were helping.
That's great, Josh. Even last week, we had what we call a brunch and bond, a Saturday time that the whole team, we had a potluck brunch like Baptists do. And face to face during that lunch, there were switches made.
Bingo. And you know what I would say, Josh? I would go so far as to stand up as the leader at that City Kids, that's your ministry, your City Kids lunch, what'd you call it? Lunch and brunch?
Brunch and bond. Brunch and bond.
Brunch and bond. That's so genius. I cannot wait to implement that somehow, some way. So at the brunch and bond, I would stand up if I were you, Josh, and I would say 3 things. I would say, number 1, I want you to take a look around. These are your people. I want you to, number 2, I want to point out, Connie, jump up here real quick. Sally, jump up here real quick. These 2 ladies had a conflict problem. Sally, when were you supposed to serve? 2 weeks ago. What happened? My kid was barfing all night long. Oh, so what did you do? Well, I put it out to the group, and Sally, got Connie or whatever to do that. And Connie says, oh yeah, it was a real blessing to do that because my mom was coming into, you showcase a success story to all of your brunch and bond people. And you say, gang, what this is, we are meeting one another's needs. What you're not saying is, hey, guess what? You're not messing over my life when I'm with my wife. That makes it about you. Bad move. This is not about you having an easier ministry experience, though that's a beautiful outcome. What you're saying is this situation, this switch and ditch, this serves you guys. We're developing community. So everybody clap wildly for these two wonderful ladies. I just want to remind you, this is how the switch and ditch thing works. God bless you guys. Get back to your brunch. Make sense?
Yep. That's great. And what was cool was I came from a church where I was like, I don't know how switch and ditch can work because we're just not planning for a quarter out. And then I came here and they planned for the full quarter out, and they had some form of switch and ditch, and not. And I just walked into that and went, oh, this is great. And now, Josh, you give me the words to say, okay, here's what this thing is, and here's how we can make this work. And why that, if we're going to call that our switch, not ditch 1.0, why that was not going great was because it was just a Facebook group, and Facebook, some are on that every day.
Some are not.
Some are not. Some are not even on that platform. We have a church with Gen Zers. They're not even on Facebook. So we moved to GroupMe, and now they're getting those as text.
Yes.
And now switches are made like that. A switch is sent out, I would say it's filled within 30 minutes most times.
This is outstanding. Now watch this. This is my encouragement to you, Josh, because it's actually working. And when it's working, sometimes we as leaders want to just take our hand off the wheel and go, sweet, this is on autopilot. Nothing is on autopilot. Okay? Nothing. So what I would encourage you to do is to continue to somehow find an applause structure by which you are saying, hey, real quick, here's a success story. These two people just switched. Guess what? Don't forget, you can do that too.
Yep.
By the way, so thankful that Connie and Jim, they did this really helpful thing. It blessed them both. Man, so really proud of them, really proud of them. Human beings move toward the applause. We just have to make sure that we're applauding the things that we want to be repeated.
That's great. And volunteers or leaders, one pro tip with GroupMe, you get to see who has the app on mute.
Ooh.
So there's been times that I'm like, you know what? Jim hasn't switched in a long time. Or Jim never presses like on my short form training video link.
Right.
I reach out and I'm just going to assume he doesn't even know that the app's on mute. I'm going to go in there and say, hey,
I think
that. You missed a lot of links and you weren't at the brunch and bond. I don't even think you heard about it.
See what you're doing right there. Time out. What you're doing is you're making a positive assumption. You're not coming down on him and wanting to slap his hand.
Right. Yeah.
And have you found that to be true?
Yes. And half of the time they go, oh, can you show me how to unmute that? I go, yeah, great. Done.
Okay. This is a huge leadership moment, Josh, because the majority of people are going to be haters on Jim, in that Jim is this dark character who's a jerk, who doesn't want to participate. He just doesn't know how to use the stinking app, for the love of all that is good. It doesn't have to do with it's our problem. It's a training problem, not his ethic problem.
Right. Yep.
Dude. So switch and not ditch. It's a powerful concept, isn't it?
Yes, it has changed my whole life. I mean, and that's not even an understatement there. Being in this role is such a joy now, because Saturday nights is not the chaos of, oh no, the Tuesdays were not staffed. So, oh no, you're also going to call in. I don't even want to look at my phone that just bust.
Oh, trust me, I get it. And this is literally, dude, this is the lifestyle of thousands of people across the country.
And no wonder they burn out.
No wonder they burn out. Okay, because they're not organized. By the way, putting together a switch and not ditch thing, it takes a measure of organization, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And if we did not have switch and not ditch,
yes,
there's no way that we would have a scheduling volunteer, who does all of my scheduling and switches. If there was no switch and ditch, it would be her job Saturday night, a volunteer to fill all those slots.
That is not appropriate. Nobody wants that job.
No.
And they're going to burn out. And they're going to look to you. Watch this. Let's say that person signs up. They're like, yeah, I'll do this. I'll be that person. I'll be the scheduler, which you're like, thank goodness it's off of my plate because that was killing me. And they're wanting to do this to help you. Praise the Lord. But then all of a sudden, it's really getting taxing on them. But let's say that they're a real good person and they just allow the bend, and they're like almost broken reed. The reed is just continuing to bend and bend and bend. And they finally go, I cannot do this. And I basically hate the church. The end.
Yep.
Not good. Listen, literally, man, it takes organization, right? So you had to create the group me. You had to create a spreadsheet or a whatever. You also had to create a relational structure and people understand the rules. That's organization, is it not?
Yes, it is. It is. And being scheduled out for an entire quarter has been the key. And that's what I missed at my last church. I didn't even have that light bulb moment of, we can't do switch and not ditch because we're not scheduled out.
Okay. Now let me give you something that worked for us. This is a piece to the 2.0. We actually put people on a forever and ever amen for nursery, especially nursery. For the upper grades, we did 40 weeks a year. We get that. But for the nursery and like early childhood ministry, for like preschool and below, we just put you on your every second Sunday until Jesus comes back or until we decide this isn't going to work for you. Now stick with me. We had mechanisms. We aren't locking people in for life. Don't hear me say that. But what I want to say is we had the entire year, and you were a part of the second Tuesday group.
Yep.
Or excuse me, not second Tuesday, second Sunday. You were a part of the second Sunday group in this room, along with this person, this person, this person, and this person, who were all a part of second Sunday in that room. Those people got community with one another. They came to expect to serve with one another. They saw each other different seasons of life, whatever. And so then, hey, you're an every second Sunday person. We have a person over here who's every fourth. Can you switch with them this time? Yes, but then they go back to their regular scheduled time. So we weren't making a schedule for a quarter. People were committing to the entire year to be that second or fourth or third. Now, of course, watch this. You have the inevitable and dark fifth Sundays. If I had like a sound effect to go dun, dun, dun. Fifth Sundays are the kill of everybody, but we had a structure and an organization and a means by which people who said, hey, I only want to serve every once in a while. Well, could you do a fifth Sunday? And here's the dates of those fifth Sundays. They're like, oh, that's easy. I can do that. So my point is that I want to push you. What if you changed it from signing people up for every quarter and you signed them up to be the second or third or fourth Sunday of the month in that room, in a sense, in perpetuity?
So we've talked about that, and why I think that would work in most churches and not ours is because we have the Johns Hopkins student.
Understood. You have this automatic revolving door that you can't. Right, okay, that's fair. That's fair.
So part of the structure here is that we send out a survey every single quarter saying, hey, has your situation changed?
And this is very intelligent, especially for your local context. Quick leadership moment for everybody. Guess what? If you are in a particular leadership context with a particular town with particular needs and a particular unique thing on Thursday nights because of the way that people work in your town, you need to lean into that and not into some canned structure. You got to know your people.
Right. And those of you who might know the place and space I'm in Baltimore, if we were like in the county, that would work. Great. But no, here that's not going to work because
you know your people.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is this is our second installment of a success story, and I'm just so proud of you. What a success story it is. Well, Josh, thank you again. Thank you for taking your time and for providing somebody out there in podcast land with the feeling of I can do this.
It's my joy. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, gang, this has been just yet one more episode of the Lead Ministry Podcast in this little micro series about success stories. We want you to be successful. A way that you can do that is by continuing to tune in and subscribe to the Lead Ministry Podcast. Contemplate what it might look like to get some of the downloads and the infrastructure that we provide through the Lead Ministry Podcast. And don't ever forget, we do have a team of certified coaches that can come alongside you and help solve some of these ministry-related difficulties. Gang, this has been how to create an environment of switching and not ditching, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.